Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today to chat with an old friend and an amazing man, the larger-than-life Keith Duncan. Keith, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, man, and good day to all the listeners out there.
Thank you. So, Keith, just want to give a little background. First of all, you are the chairman of Jamaica's Economic Program Oversight Committee, or EPOC, as we will refer to it later in the conversation. And in August of 2020, I am so proud of you for having been conferred with the national honor of the Order of Distinction in the rank of Commander for exceptional service in the fields of finance, business, youth empowerment, and community development. Quite a mouthful, and congratulations, Keith. So this is why you're such a busy man, and you hold the record for the person that has made me wait the longest for an interview. I've waited 5 years for this day.
Hey, looking
but
forward.
Nothing before it. Yeah, nothing before its time. And I'm so pleased to be having this conversation with you on the eve of Jamaica's 60th anniversary of its independence, because of the amazing work that you and the EPOC has been able to do and achieve in Jamaica. And just a little background as to what the EPOC is. The EPOC has been established since 2013 to monitor the implementation of Jamaica's economic reform measures under its agreement with the IMF. The committee comprises 11 persons from the private and public sectors and civil society. They receive and assess information from the government of Jamaica to track the progress of the targets under the precautionary standby arrangement, which was signed in 2016 with the IMF. The EPOC also assists in ensuring that the agreed targets are achieved and advise the public. This is very important. The EPOC advises the public of any concerns or developments through traditional and digital media. And that's the part I love the most, because it's public disclosure and accountability. So Keith, big things are Gwaan in Jamaica, and for a long time too. And so just to start the questions I have for you, can you tell us the story of Jamaica's EPOC and how it came about, please?
Okay. Well, thank you, Marla. Just a little correction. EPOC was first. The first round of EPOC was in 2013, right?
13, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Correct. And okay, so up to in 2010, we had the 2008 to 2010, we had our global financial crisis, right? And then if you go back a little further, in the 90s and 2000s, we had periodic bouts of macroeconomic instability. We had the fiscal. We're spending a lot more than we're earning. Our debt to GDP numbers were increasing significantly. We got to as high as 140%, 7% of GDP. So we had the financial sector fallout in the 90s, and Jamaica was just really, I would say, all over the place. It was almost like a basket case, right? Up to maybe 2010, right? And after the global financial crisis, we had to go back to the IMF. We had been with the IMF, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, and in the 90s we said Tata IMF, and after the global financial crisis, we said we had to get back because we had a balance of payments issue. And our fiscal
just to put a pin there, balance of payments issue, meaning we ran out of foreign exchange to pay for our import, for our debt, right?
Our reserves went to like maybe $500 million in terms of our over net international reserves, which was months of import
cover.
Yeah. And in 2010, we entered into an agreement with the International Monetary Fund. We started to put the Fiscal Responsibility Act in place in terms of as one of the deliverables of the International Monetary Fund was that we put a legislative framework in place that would legislate fiscal rules, right? That agreement with the IMF was signed around 2010. Prior to that, there were some preconditions like a debt swap, the sale of Air Jamaica to Trinidad. Thank you very much, and other preconditions which had to be satisfied. The financial sector and wider Jamaica had to swap in their bonds at a significant discount and took a major hit on their to their balance sheets. Those retail and institutional customers took a real hit. Pension funds took a real hit on their balance sheets, etc. To facilitate this debt swap, which would have taken down Jamaica's debt, but also extended its maturities. And all of Jamaica came on board because we thought this was being done in the best interest of Jamaica, and also that it would give us that macroeconomic stability that we have always wanted, and we all went along. Now, as we progressed and we were able to achieve low interest rates from 2010 to 11, etc., the fiscal house became unhinged once again. And this was due to pressures from the public sector and other areas, and we just were not able to maintain our fiscal projections, maintain the fiscal performance that was required under the IMF program. And the IMF program, we failed the IMF test, and we, 2012, we were then back again without an IMF program, and a lot of uncertainty, volatility, and this was due mainly to the fact that the government of Jamaica at the time did not meet their fiscal targets, right? So in 2012, 13, the entire year, we had lost credibility and confidence of the multilateral institutions, of the financial institutions, of the Jamaican public in Jamaica's ability to manage its macro fiscal affairs, right? And we were lucky, and this was on the to get an IMF deal, because the IMF was saying, you guys are not serious. You guys really have no level of commitment to making the adjustments that are necessary to be able to put yourself on a solid macro fiscal footing. And I think that was the sentiment across the Jamaica. Now, the government of Jamaica was able to at least get audience through the efforts of the Prime Minister at the time, Portia Simpson Miller, get audience, and this was because she had consulted the Women's Caucus of Black Women's Caucus of the Congress of the U.S. to put pressure on the IMF to at least have a conversation with us, because they had to basically wash their hands of us. And we were able to get that audience, and the Minister of Finance at the time got to the table with the IMF, and they really asked for some aggressive fiscal targets, and we really had no choice. And we once again had to enter into another debt swap called the National Debt Exchange. The first one was the Jamaica Debt Exchange, where everybody came on willingly. And this was now the second debt swap, the National Debt Exchange. And of course, everyone would have been saying, well, we are not going to go down this road again unless we have some level of oversight in place. And we met with the Minister of Finance, and there was active advocacy for some oversight mechanism to be put in place, right? If you go online, JMB, the institution which I had, the financial institution which I had, was leading that call for oversight publicly. Others were in the background saying, well, we need something, because we cannot take the risk that we go into another IMF program and we miss the targets and we fail again, because that could spell utter disaster and chaos, right?
Yeah, this was the last chance.
the last chance. So that you know, like a day, almost a day before the financial institution. So we're all engaged and we're working it through. And a day before the National Debt Exchange, and we're financial institutions, which were the primary target at this point in time, were to swap in their bonds. We said we are not applying our signatures until we have an oversight mechanism in place, right?
Well done.
And the Minister of Finance at the time, Dr. Peter Phillips, said to us, and he said to me directly, and I went to my office, go and write the terms of reference. Let's work through the terms of reference for the Economic Program Oversight Committee. And that night, I engaged with our JMB attorneys, Mark Harrison and Harrison, and Mike Hilton, a noted attorney in Jamaica, who drafted that terms of reference. And I went through that with Bruce Bowen from Scotiabank. Both he and I worked on it over the night. And we had that agreement in front of all the heads of the financial sector the following morning to be signed with the Minister of Finance, which we signed. And the Minister of Finance at the time, Dr. Peter Phillips, as I said, he ensured that there was broad representation from civil society, private sector, unions, agriculture, small business, represented at the table on this oversight committee, and we all signed off on this terms of reference for the Economic Program Oversight Committee. And that's the birth of EPOC, right?
Wow, what a story.
Yes, it was then Richard Biles, who was the head of one of our financial groups in Jamaica, Sagicor Jamaica, became the co-chair along with Brian Winter of the Bank of Jamaica at the inception of EPOC. Richard, the role of the civil society member, who was Richard Biles at the time, who is now the current governor, was to convene these EPOC meetings and to take in reports from both the Bank of Jamaica and the Ministry of Finance, the Bank of Jamaica on monetary policy, the Ministry of Finance on the fiscal performance, and report to the country independently of the co-chair, which would have been the governor at the time of the Bank of Jamaica, Brian Winter. And and Richard Biles was able to establish a connection with the public, because we all knew that we were in a bind, and if we weren't able to pull it off, that this could, as I said, we could go down a road of no return. And as a result, the Economic Program Oversight Committee was very relevant to the Jamaican people at the time, even if they didn't understand the jargon, etc. On a monthly basis, Richard Biles would come in and report to the public around where we were, where there were gaps, and if we're on track, if we're off track. And there was a strong commitment by the government of Jamaica, who said balance the books while balancing people's lives, to ensuring that the books were balanced, and that there was a series of tax increases to ensure that we could make that we could hit our revenue targets. Our economy was still very much in an anemic phase, low growth or no growth or negative growth. So it was a very tough period for Jamaica. And as I said, we were under the IMF standby agreement. We had an IMF extended fund facility agreement at the time, which was supposed to go from 2013 to 2017. We were able to successfully execute that program up to 2016, when the government of Jamaica, there were elections and there was a change in the government, and the Andrew Holness-led Jamaica Labour Party took became the administration of the day, and we went with a new EPOC where I became the chairperson of EPOC at that time,
Okay.
closely with the government of Jamaica to establish it with the same level of representation, as I said, from all the various civil society sectors.
And oversight and accountability.
Oversight and accountability were very important. But
Right.
by that time, we had established some kind of rhythm in terms of the
Yeah.
fiscal monetary, and it was more around EPOC now became how do we engage wider Jamaica, because we saw this Government of Jamaica Economic Reform Program, and we had a new IMF agreement, the standby arrangement, where we said this was Jamaica's plan. We had to go out there, educate, bring public awareness to why is this necessary for us to put Jamaica in a place to get to fiscal sustainability, debt sustainability. Remember, we started debt to GDP at 147%. It came down to approximately 115% in 2016. And right now it's at somewhere around 90, hovering around 90%, set to close the year at 82% next year.
Beautiful. So that leads me nicely into the next question as to what do you think are the biggest achievements of the EPOC so far? What are you most proud of?
What I would say is EPOC in its first dispensation from 2013 was able to really hold the government of Jamaica to account in a powerful way in public communication. In those EPOC meetings, they were very, very incisive. We really got behind the numbers. The chairmanship of Richard Biles at the time was tremendous, and he did a significant amount of work. He kept the communication as simple as he could to the public to ensure that there was buy-in, and there was tremendous buy-in by the public. So a big win was the relationship forged, even if it's an oversight relationship, working with the Bank of Jamaica and the Ministry of Finance in their reporting into EPOC, and the ability to have that inclusive kind of conversation where you have the unions at the table, so they understand the sacrifices that they need to make, because we had to have wage freezes at the time, where we have business community at the table. So when there were reasons to increase taxes, that they they understood the numbers and the context and why. And when we had the financial institutions at the table, so they were very clear around that the government of Jamaica was maintaining the macro fiscal performance that was necessary and to drive confidence. And as a result of that, we saw interest rates come down significantly over time due to confidence. So it was inclusivity, it was engagement with the public, it was really a collaborative kind of / oversight relationship that developed with EPOC and the government of Jamaica through the Ministry of Finance, and the Bank of Jamaica through the governor of the central bank, who were all at the table along with their technical people, right?
Yes, that is an achievement. And I mean, I feel like perhaps as well you achieved a huge education outcome, because the wider Jamaican population understood a lot more about macroeconomic management than, I would say, maybe the average person in other countries in the Caribbean that don't have this sort of regular conversations with the public, showing you this is exactly where inflation, growth, fiscal numbers, and this is why debt is where it is, and this is what we're doing about it. That's a huge achievement in itself. And so that's something I think you can be really proud of.
And what we did was that we actually started a series of consultations in communities. We call it
I saw those videos. Excellent videos, yeah.
EPOC on the corner. And what you got was to have that conversation around why is not spending more than you earn so important?
Right.
What does it mean for us in the future? What does creating fiscal space mean for us? What does it mean for basic services, for education, for national security, for sanitation, for just basic public services to the general public, who is who we all serve? And therefore, if you're creating more fiscal space, you have more financial resources to be able to address those areas. It was important for people to get a connection, and it was important to even share their thoughts. And that's what connected more importantly was that the average person in the community, and this was done with the Jamaican Dean at the time, would share their thoughts around it and around where they thought the priority should be, and it really engaged the wider Jamaica public in a big way.
So you had a feedback mechanism then that you can then utilize in your policy recommendation.
And it wasn't with the just the business community or financial. It was the average Jamaican citizen in a community. We'd go into community bars and we'd sit down and we'd have the conversation and we'd video it and it would be like them saying, "Oh, we are talking about Mr. Duncan." You know what I mean? And
Love it.
Yeah.
So I've seen the videos and they're amazing. And the way that you reach people and they of course give you their feedback, that's so important, because otherwise you're in an ivory tower thinking certain things are going on when really that's not the reality. So but tell us how this EPOC is made up, the stakeholder groups involved, because that to me is a critical part of why this works so well. And have there been any material changes to the composition of the group over the years?
No, there hasn't been material changes. So there is maybe the addition of academia from 2016. But have the academia, unions, agriculture, private sector, all the private sector organization of Jamaica, the MSME, micro and small medium enterprise alliance, the financial institutions, the 4 largest holders of government of Jamaica debt, and the unions, of course, because they play a critical role in ensuring that there is some level of forbearance from the public sector, because they need to also make significant sacrifices over the time through successive wage freezes in order for government of Jamaica. So their purchasing power has been reduced over time, and they had to make the sacrifice to ensure that we got there. But it took political will, and it took the leadership of a Portia Simpson Miller, who had a deep emotional connection with the Jamaican public, to really get us through our rough years.
Wow.
And that's the composition of it.
Right. And when I look at what the EPOC has been able to drive in terms of accountability for implementation and for disclosure publicly and education of the public, I feel like every country in this region needs an EPOC. But one can imagine that politicians wouldn't necessarily want to institutionalize something like an EPOC, because it then drives lots of scrutiny and accountability, which makes some people uncomfortable. What are your thoughts on that, on this whole issue of wanting or needing an EPOC in the absence of an IMF program, and how beneficial accountability is?
Well, even right now, we don't have an IMF program in place, and we do have an EPOC very much in place.
Still.
And government of Jamaica lays out its economic reform program, its quantitative performance criteria. Those are the numbers, the assumptions. It lays out the qualitative performance criteria, the policy initiatives, and these are monitored by EPOC with some oversight. So even without an IMF program, EPOC has been quite useful and an important mechanism or institution in the framework. Now, what it does for governments, and the governments need to see it from this perspective, is that what it does, it ensures that major stakeholders get on side with the government of Jamaica programs, plans. It means
so there's buy-in.
There is buy-in, and that's where. So therefore, when people have an appreciation and understanding of the economic reform program, its objectives, and where we're heading, there can be buying. But if everyone is on the outskirt, not really understanding what's going on, and why we're doing what we're doing, and then people almost become people will speak without having the facts and being able to speak in a constructive manner.
And it might even breed suspicion in some cases, because I'm not sure what you're doing and why you're doing it, and I'm suffering as a result.
Exactly, and that is what governments need to understand. But we can understand because when we only had the leverage of the poor performance of governments in Jamaica, and because we had that leverage, because if we didn't sign off on that bond swap, there would have been no IMF in 2013. There would have been no IMF deal. So we had the leverage at the time, because of course there would have been resistance. But now that EPOC is placed, everyone sees a role and a place for EPOC with or without an IMF program. So
absolutely
leverage. But so EPOC has to be sold from a way of getting buy-in from all the critical stakeholders in society, to get them on board, so that they are clear what the national objectives are and how the macro fiscal program drives towards us achieving those national developmental goals.
And if those goals are met, then the government looks good, and then they can get reelected. So it makes sense from a political standpoint as well, right? Because that's what they want, presumably.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about how EPOC has driven economic reform by having that accountability and inclusiveness and communication. But let's talk about institutional reform, because I see EPOC as a major institutional reform. And probably Jamaica, to me, looks like it's had the most institutional reform in the last 10 years, and economic reform in the last 10 years of any country in the English-speaking Caribbean. That's my perspective. And you've seen the benefits of that. So talk to me about the other institutional reforms in addition to EPOC that have supported EPOC, and what Jamaica's institutional reform trajectory has looked like for the past 10 years, or the recent past, because I feel like this is what the Caribbean needs, especially now that we're celebrating 60 years of independence in Jamaica and in Trinidad. It really is an opportunity to look back, and the institutions that we were left with 60 years ago perhaps are not the ones that are relevant and are perhaps not fit for purpose. And I see the EPOC and the other institutional reforms that you have in Jamaica as being necessary to take Jamaica forward in the future. So talk to us about that.
Yeah. So first of all, you need the legislation, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and other legislation in place that legislate fiscal rules. So Jamaica, what we call fiscal rules, and primarily focused around quantitative targets. Like Jamaica fiscal rule is to get to 60% debt to GDP by 2027, 28. And within that medium term, short term target, the fiscal rule speaks to the annual primary surplus targets, and the debt to GDP number at the end of every financial year. So we know where that's legislated, right?
Legislated, which means the government has to adhere to these targets in terms of how it spends and how much it can borrow. Yes.
Exactly. And in the only way those fiscal rules can be adjusted is if there is like a shock like COVID, right? Had to push back our 60% 2025, 26 target for debt to GDP to 2027, 28, right? When we pushed back, we had to go back to Parliament. In other words, when those rules were deviated from the original rules that were in place from 2013, we had to go to Parliament. They had to be signed off from the government of Jamaica and opposition around the changes to the fiscal rules, right? they now become embedded once again, and they are the standard by which the government of Jamaica and their performance is judged, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that is very important. One of the areas that is central bank independence and inflation targeting. The central bank has had to fix its balance sheet over time, has had to put in the capacity to be able to focus around inflation targeting. And like Jamaica has a target range of between 4 and 6%. We're outside that range right now, but this is the primary mandate of the Bank of Jamaica, and they sit with the Minister of Finance, and they take that target from the Minister of Finance, and that is the mandate that they work with, right?
Right.
So the capacity at the Bank of Jamaica had to be built out to be able to for the Bank of Jamaica to have that level of capacity to be able to deliver. And secondly, the independence, and Jamaica was able to achieve central bank independence in 2020. That was very important also, because there's no longer the risk of printing money of the Bank of Jamaica jacking up rates anyway, because of a fiscal issue. You know what I mean? Or the government of Jamaica saying to them, we need to print money and really inflate money supply in order for the economy to grow and for people to have more money in their pockets. The Bank of Jamaica has independence now, central bank independence. Right?
And they act in accordance with their inflation target.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So even if they're raising interest rates because they have to, and that could have a negative impact on domestic demand and growth in the economy and interest rates, to the depositors and to borrowers, that's what the bank needs to do to maintain macroeconomic stability and price stability. So that's out of the hands of the Ministry of Finance. You know,
with good reason.
With good reason. So that's institutional capacity has been built, and over the years we have had to build out, the foreign exchange trading tools. We have had to build up the net international reserves, and Jamaica moving from net international reserves of like 500 million, as I told you, at a low point, to over $3.8 billion right now, and even whilst when we had the hit from COVID with the economy shut down and tourism shut down, we're able to have that buffer
increase, and you had it increase too at a certain point in time. I remember,
and so we had fiscal buffers, and we had foreign exchange buffers as a result of responsible macroeconomic policy, and that's why we're able to get our economy back on track so quickly after COVID, and we expect to be back at pre-COVID levels in December of this year.
Excellent.
So those are some of the areas, the legislation, and also building out within the fiscal division of the Ministry of Finance. A lot of training has occurred in that area, and the Ministry of Finance now has to produce fiscal policy papers at the beginning of in the budget period, and do a 6-month interim fiscal policy paper where it lays out all the assumptions, the medium-term targets, the debt sustainability targets, the revenue targets. Everything is in the public domain transparently. So you have to build institutional capacity, right? And this now, everyone becomes a little bit more comfortable because of the transparency, because we know the disclosure, and we know that the technical capacity has been built, has been continually, built out.
Right. And you have a fiscal council that was installed not that long ago.
Well, the fiscal council is not installed yet. What we have done
not installed yet. Okay.
The legislation has been passed for a fiscal commission, right? An independent fiscal commission that will ensure that they do the deep analysis, because EPOC does not have the technical the technical skill sets because we're all volunteers. That's it on
Right.
EPOC, you know,
Right.
and we don't have the bench strength of having economists working for us to do the deep analysis. So
Right.
therefore, between an independent central bank and a fiscal commission that will be resourced to be able to really analyze the budgets, analyze the revenues, analyze the expenditures, analyze the whole fiscal profile and the fiscal makeup and the projections and the debt sustainability and the assumptions that drive the budget will be now the remit of an independent fiscal commission. Right?
And will this independent fiscal commission also have the same level of disclosure and engagement as the central bank has and the EPOC has with the public?
Yeah, well, definitely. One of there was wide consultation around how we would retain the inclusiveness of an EPOC, and that would be what we call an advisory committee to the fiscal commissioner, and that made up of again broad stakeholders across the civil society, private sector, unions, academia, and other civil society representation, who will be that advisory committee, and their minutes or will be published in the same way where you have the monetary policy committee side on the central bank side with representation of stakeholders. Their minutes are published. You will have this will give their minutes will be published also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I love this transparency. You have no idea. This is really exciting news to me. I really wish that, you know, every country in the Caribbean, not that they go through what you guys went through to get here, but I really feel like this is a level of progress brought on by institutional reform that is remarkable. And I mean, I really thank you, Keith, for sharing this story with me and for shedding light on how Jamaica came from a balance of payments crisis, not having enough foreign exchange reserves in 2013, straight through till just before COVID, recording the lowest unemployment and lowest poverty rate ever in its history, which again, we've just seen very low unemployment rates being recorded in Jamaica. That's tremendous progress in a short space of time, in a difficult period.
Yeah. And once you have macroeconomic stability, that is your baseline. That creates an enabling environment because interest rates are going to be low, inflation is going to be in check. There's going to be some exchange rate stability. There is availability of foreign exchange.
Availability of foreign exchange, so important.
So important to drive growth. And what we will see is that over time, Jamaica's economy will begin to, as we make structural changes in our economy, supply side constraints, etc. Jamaica will move from a average 1% growth over the last 50 years, and we'll start to see greater growth levels over time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Keith,
for
this most inspiring discussion. I really hope policymakers, economists, the public at large, all over the region see this and understand how Jamaica got where it did, and the fact that it's not impossible. It gives a lot of hope for the future of many countries, like my own Trinidad, like here in Barbados. Really an inspiring story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Keith, and for spending time with me today. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Marla, and thanks for having me. And all the best to you and the team
all
and
the
all
best to you.
Your viewers. Yes.
Thank you, and happy independence as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And happy independence to you too.
Thank you. Thank you. We're 60 now. All right.
Right. Take care.
Bye.